I wish I had a father figure in my life because it has affected me negatively. And in fact, it's good my son is sitting down here. I've not been a good father to them because I don't know how to be a father. I can see that myself.
There is a common saying that old age brings wisdom. So on today's episode, we have a man who has 88 years of experience in this journey that we call life. He who learns from the elders is like one who has a field of gold. So sit back, relax, grab your pen and paper as we hear the words of wisdom from the Tayese himself, Mr. Otunba Babs Kuti. Welcome, sir. It's great to have you in studio today.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So, sir, why are you called the Tayese? What does it mean?
Well, Tayese is a title that I always refer to as ancestral. And from my late grandfather's village, called a town called Ipebi in Ijebu-Mushin. We didn't know much about it when we were young, but as we grew up, I in particular was lucky to be introduced into Ipebi at an early age. So that title is a title that I was given by the community as a leader of the community.
Wow.
But it's ancestral.
It sounds amazing because when I check the literal translation online, it says he who, I think the world, he who the world is against. Is that the meaning of it?
Whose intervention brings joy to life.
Oh, he whose intervention brings joy to life.
As far as the community is concerned, for instance, the influence that I've been able to bring about within the community itself got it to a point in which they felt that they had to give that honor to me, but then the Oloko of Ijebu-Mushin, who is the paramount ruler of Ijebu-Mushin himself, then told the Oba of Ipebi that the title he wants to give to me is Tayese. Tun Ayeshe. That is the Yoruba of it.
Okay.
Tun Ayeshe. So the person who helps to make life better.
Has brought a lot of joy to the community.
Exactly.
So when and where were you born?
Well, I was born in Ijebu-Ode. That for sure I know, even though we are people from Ipebi, Ijebu-Mushin. But my late father was resident in Ijebu-Ode whilst I was born there. And I remember that very well, that by the time I became aware of my surroundings, Ayegbami Street is an area that's, in those days when I was a little boy, used to be referred to as Oke Onyibo.
Okay, Oyibo.
What that translates to is that it's the area where the white man lives. What later became GRA, normally, in other parts of the western region. In Ijebu, it was called Okoyimbo, it was not called GRA. And that was the DO, the resident DO, each in the western region, I can talk about the western region, we had district heads who were white people, and they were called DO, district officers.
What year was that?
Well, I was born in 1936.
Wow.
And by the time I grew up enough to know that area was called Okoyimbo, it took my going to primary school to experience why it was called Igbo, because that's where the district officer lived, and that's where every year we pay homage to the Queen. And we call it Empire Day. And all children from primary school in Djibouti would have to go there and go around, march around and in their uniforms and all of that, and then maybe waving little flags and so on. So that's paying reverence to the Queen of England at that time. But as I said, I was a little boy, so I didn't know the significance of that occasion. I just knew that all schools were there. But that was the importance of the area where we lived. It was that it was close to the area where the district officer lived.
What's your earliest memory?
Earlier memories of my...
So the earliest memory you have?
Well, by the time I became aware of my environment, I think I must have been about 5 or 4, just about 4. Even let me put it back as much as 3.
Wow.
Because at that time we didn't have carpets and things like that. It was bare floor. And I remember that as children we had no toys. But by tradition, in the Western region, parents usually got something that was carved, wooden, as a toy for us. And that wouldn't just look like, really, as I grew up, I began to see it as not really helping in any of our games or play. So, but that was how crude it was. No toys, but we had this wooden thing that as children would be playing with, passing from one person to another. It didn't help reading. It didn't contribute to our ability to learn letters and all that. But we knew by the time you began to play with it, you were already growing up. So it's a sign of your maturing into an older age. Younger ones, like 1 year old, will not be given that to play with yet. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I also realized that I was born into a large family, even though as early as then. Because the environment itself was such that we had a building in front of our house and another building at the back. I was very much aware that my late mother lived in the front part with my late father, where my father had his apartment on the left, my late mother had the apartment on the right. Myself and my siblings in an apartment
different one
with my late mother. The rest of the family were in the back house. So I didn't know the importance of that until, again, as I grew up more and more, that I realized that the people who lived at the back were families of my late father. So those early experiences quickly let me know that I was really in the midst of a lot
family.
of family, not just my mother and my father. Then the next one is that I also grew up to know that our father was an absent father.
How?
Well, I mean, at that stage, by the time we were born, I was born. I'm the second of 12 children.
12?
Yes.
Wow.
I didn't see my father.
You don't remember?
No, not that I don't remember. We all knew, I knew that I was a father. I had a senior brother who was 10 years older than me. It took 10 years to make me.
Wow.
Okay? My mother had my senior brother first, and then it took 10 years before I came along. However, still, I got to know that there were other women. And I had other siblings in the same building. Okay? As early as that. But there was no father. Because we knew that my late father's apartment was a living room and a bedroom and 2 bedrooms. His photograph was on the wall, wearing masonry suit. He was a mason. I grew up to know what that photograph represented. But he was not around. He was always not around because he was, at the time, as we grew up to know later, working for UAC. At that time, it was the early stages, if you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 1930s now. By that time, he was already employed by the UAC to work in the subsidiaries in Western region. And since UAC would only be in urban areas, for Ijebu, where I was born, is the urban center. But then there are other urban centers in the Western region. So it was situated in one of those urban centers. And funny enough, all of us children, we didn't think of a father, really, because he was absent.
But did you ever get to form a bond with him?
No bond.
Nothing.
That was the truth. And that, as I became man, I realized what all of us, myself and my siblings, really missed out on, because knowing that he was away was a fact for all of us. The only good thing that I can say came out of that period was the fact that the family arranged for us to go to the station to spend holidays with him. And that was one good thing that came out of our own curiosity, because we knew we didn't see a father. And during the holiday, the family arranged for us to go to a journey. It's in the Western region. It's the suburb of Ekpe. That's where that was. It's by the seaside. We went there to spend time with him, and in that area, it became obvious to me that he must have an important job to do for the company, because the house, at that time, the white man's house was built with wood. You do the basement concrete or whatever, or mud, but they will do upstairs with one floor with wood, but it isn't wood. So our holiday was spent in Nigeria. The first one we spent, and this, from the early age, I used to know that you can build a house with wood.
Wow.
Plank, strong plank. But when you walked on the plank, every step you do will be,
You hear the sound.
audible. So I got to know that right from early age.
Sir, you lived through independence, you lived through Civil War. What was it like, Nigerian independence? Do you remember that day?
Well, by the time we were celebrating independence, I was already out of secondary school. And it was a big occasion for all of us as Nigerians, because even though we knew we were being ruled by the white man, or we saw the white man occasionally if we went close to the center of governance. Even in Djibouti, the DO's office was the center of town. So as you move nearer that place, you will see the difference in what the area looks like
Compared to
where your own home is. So it was an important occasion for us when we realized that it was independence. But then we thought the independence was for the politicians. We didn't understand what it was meant to do for us, who are not politicians. Because by the time we were doing that, we already become aware of politics that was going on. In the Western region, Chief Obafemi Awolowo was the premier. Eastern region, Azikiwe, then subsequently Okpara. Then in the northern region, Amadu Bello. All those things we knew that clearly. But because of the struggle about unions protesting, it appeared the unions were used to protest against the white. So by the time they now declared independence, our own idea was that maybe these politicians are getting the independence, and then we will not see the white man anymore. That was the way we took that.
Were you worried about that, not seeing?
No. We were happy that they were going, but we didn't know what the implication of that would be for the country. So we had a big celebration, particularly at the time the independence was happening. I transited from Djibouti to Lagos. I moved from Djibouti once I graduated from the primary school. I went into Igbo College in Lagos. So from that point on, I became resident in Lagos. So the activity of the celebration itself proper, we were able to at least experience and feel the importance and significance of that. So independence was okay. We were happy.
When you look back now, all these years later, do you think independence, do you still have the same happiness and joy when you hear it's Independence Day? Do you still feel that same feel?
Let me ask you first whether because between the secondary school and independence, a lot has happened, okay? Which I thought helped to mold my own approach and attitude to life. The first is that in the primary school, before we could even graduate from primary school, our father died in 1947. 1947, yes. At the age of 46. So that I was 11 years old when he died. So for the experience of being pulled out of class. All myself and my siblings who were already in the same school, in Ijebu, Christ Church, Borogun School, not knowing why we were pulled out of class during the day, and having to follow the man who came to school to request the headmaster to have us follow him back home. That experience left a lasting effect on all of us. Now we came close to the house. Then we realized that there was so much commotion in the house. Not knowing, as I said, not realizing what happened. We moved in. The commotion continued. The old people were crying and jumping up and down, and we were just confused. We didn't understand what was going on, not knowing that our father was the one that died, that the family was mourning. From that point on, everything changed. Because whilst he was alive, he was away, but our schooling was arranged for, everything was done properly, uniforms were bought properly, pocket money was given to every child through our mothers regularly. We didn't feel anything. We went to school happily and all of that. But when he died, then it was the first time I could see at first hand my own mother confronting real difficulties. Because I had 3 other stepmothers beside my own mom. Some were not within the house; they were living in their home with their children. But there was one other stepmother that lived in the house with us. And the noise that came ringing out there was how the children would go to school, who would pay the school fees. And that was the commotion that I kept hearing. I wasn't immersed in the discussion or whatever because I was still a young person. But I was seeing that was a concern for all of them as they continue to discuss that. So that began my problem, because to see my mom, who was normally a calm person, become totally shattered at that time. I saw it at first hand as she struggled. And then we gradually all had to move out of my mom had to move out of the house because my late uncle could not have her as long as he was able to have my other stepmother, who was younger than him. But my mom was older than my uncle, so the arrangement could not fit in. So my mom had to move out of the house, so I had to follow my mom to her own parents' home. So those are experiences that really impacted my life. So when we got to the time we came to the point of this celebration of independence, by the time I was living in Lagos, I was already living an orphan's life, an orphan. Nobody, my mother is struggling to make sure that there was money so that I can survive the pressures of not having money for secondary school. But my uncle paid the school fees. It's the other things that he didn't bother about. So those were things that bothered me. Even though the celebration of the independence was something, but it was like something that was happening. I was seeing it. I was happy to see it, but it wasn't really part of my joy. Wow. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I had to leave Nigeria in 1961 for abroad because, as I said, once my father died, how the future would be, I had no clue. from that point on. So I had to struggle to begin to think about myself now. So how I could survive without putting too much pressure on my late mother. So 60 was independence, 61 I was off to the UK.
Wow, I can't imagine how you guys were able to.
That was the journey was still by struggling. So it wasn't something like I'm going to the UK and I just get up and carry my luggage and went off. It was seeing at that stage pre-independence that we had only one university. And most of us in Bobi College final year, Bobi College ran classes from class 1 to 5, while some schools went from 1 to 6. We ran 1 to 5.
So this is the age you're talking about now. How old are you? You were that's 1960s.
I went into school, secondary school in 1952.
1952. Okay.
Yes, 1952.
So let's can we go back into the 1950s a bit?
Yes.
So 1950s was when there was the Civil War.
Yes. No, not 1950. The roots of the Civil War began in the 50s. But Civil War came in the post-independence.
Okay.
After the independence is when the Civil War came.
And was that after you had left Nigeria, or were you still?
After I've left Nigeria.
After you left Nigeria.
Yes. But the beginning of the problems started, and we were already witnessing the issues of the political problems.
What was it like?
Which preceding the independence itself, the country struggled with the leaders not agreeing to what independence should be looking like for Nigeria. Whereas the North thought they would want to be on their own because they are a different culture completely from the South. They were insisting on not wanting the amalgamation, but the British nonetheless brought the North together with the South. And when that happened, the North complained that they don't have people who are educated in Western education. So Southerners were running the civil service in the North. At that time, that's why I'm saying to you, the independence itself was not the things that happened before it had been impacting people like me who was observing things. Northerners had only children who went to Quranic schools. They didn't have Western education. Only a few of them, the leaders who had any education at all, up to teachers training school. So they were worried that if there is independence there, they won't be able to run their civil service. So Yoruba, Igbos, and other tribes were taken by the colonizers to go to the North. So running train railways from Lagos to the North, the drivers were Yoruba and Igbo people. Post office being operated in the North was Southerners. Everything, civil service in the North was run by Southerners. Wow. So in that situation, when the issue of independence then came up for discussion, the struggle between the South that understood what independence meant and the North, who on the other hand thought if that independence happened, they would be enslaved by the South, were reluctant They didn't want independence. They actually were opposed to independence. So when it got to a head, then the South had to promise the North that, okay, they would make allowances for the North so that they can educate their children, so that they can have Western education gradually to be able to pick up the civil service work in the North.
Yeah, to have some control.
So that they shouldn't worry, they shouldn't fear. And also that the independence will not lead to the South breaking, just leaving the North behind. So that promise had to be made to the North before it agreed that, okay, there will be an independence. But insisted that we should first have a taste of what independence will look like. And so that the colonizers then said, okay, we'll give you self-rule. That's what they called it. Self-rule, northern region, self-rule, western region, self-rule, eastern region. So that was promulgated, and each region then became self-rule. So we had civil service for the west, the north, and the east. And Lagos was then the colony, which was the capital of Nigeria. So, despite that, the South insisted that there must be a date for there must be a date fixed
for the independence.
For the independence, that the self-rule cannot continue indefinitely. And the North, again, was opposing the fixing of dates for independence. But then the South said, okay, don't worry. Let us have the independence. If you agree to independence, we will do the constitution that will make sure that all the governance will be done by all of us. You too will be part of it. That's where the federal character came into the play in the constitution. But don't worry, the South will not continue to run the country all alone.
You'll run it.
So you will have a role to play. So it's agreed. So then the date was fixed for 1960. Then there had to be elections. When it was regions, the regions did their elections on their own. They didn't have anybody to interfere. But when it now came to preparation for the federal, preparation to independence, there has to be an election to select a parliament.
So how come what you're telling me is not what I've read in my history books? The first time.
Because some of the things will be missed out because it's not palatable.
Because it sounds like independence was
never wants to be reflected in any literature that showed that it was backward, that it was anti-Western education and all those things. Doesn't want it reflected. So all that is edited out. But in reality, that I was old enough to see it happen. So election had to be held. And so the Europeans decided, and at that time they have found oil. From 1950s, they found oil. But we didn't know as a country that they found oil.
So the colonizers found oil.
They found oil, and they had quietly been doing their laboratory, something abroad. We didn't know about oil, but they have found oil. So invariably, we had to have the election. Then problems came. The wise people thought if they allowed the election to follow the normal path, the South will leave the North behind and leave them out. So the white did not trust the South. So they introduced the need to have a census. So population census was a new thing for us. We never did one before. So it's the white people who also would do it. It's not us. So they set about the enumeration. We were all printing, and then so when they announced the result of the census, as young as we were in the Igbo College, we knew something was wrong. That the North, which is arid land, had more people in it than the South.
So even from when you were young, this issue has been...
My Igbo College days, we were all aware that this was a cooked something. So, but the South was so eager to have that independence. They didn't want anything to disturb them. They said, well, okay, let us accept that. Because that's where we have to know that. You people have to know that in reality, the population census was cooked from the beginning in order to ensure that the South cannot run away with the independence. So the result of any election would always reflect that the North had numbers more than us in the parliament. So when it came to voting, they have been told that they should just oppose anything that is going to... So that is part of the history pre-independence. So you can see the struggle that have gone now. And then they conducted the election. Funny enough, and I use the word advisedly the way I've done. Funny enough, because I grew up as a young boy in Yaba, in Lagos, Zig's printing press, the pilot, was what it was called, was in Sabo. And it was a very popular fellow amongst Lagosians. That's Zig by himself. Everybody loved him. So come election now, the Yoruba voted because of Zig for the party Zig was leading. And in the end, Zig was going to be prime minister in what we will call, even at that time, that's the election for the regional self-government that I'm talking about now. For Lagos, which is part of the West, the result of the election of Lagos West region of Nigeria was won by Zig. So it became a problem right from the beginning, before independence. So this where struggles have started. And it became funny that how can we have three regions? The Igbo man is prime minister in the east. The Ahmadu Bello is prime minister in the north. And the western region, which is only Yoruba and Shekiri and so will be ruled by also an Igbo man. We were young, but that the picture became clear. So from that incident started the problem of Nigeria. Because then the West then had to, Chief Awolowo then had to challenge the Yoruba boys in the NCNC, because They all had concluded the election. This kind of argument about rigging was not present at that election. The election result was announced and Zik won. So the morning that they would commence the work of the parliament, because Awolowo had set about getting the Yorubas in the NCNC to realize that it would be an anomaly to have a region of Western region that is ruled by an Igbo man.
Person, yeah.
So on the morning of the beginning of business of the day, 3 people walked across from NCNC to AG on the floor of the house. I hope you understand what I'm saying. On that very morning. So that's how Awolowo then became premier, instead of Zik. So that seed was sown. Because as I said, I was only a young man at the time, but for the elders, it was a conundrum. Now, what happened to us in the Western region? That even though we love Zik, we forget that Zik cannot be premier in the Western region. It will only create problem.
Yeah.
But still, people are just didn't think about it. So from that situation, it became a question of trust and started from that situation.
Yeah.
So independence came. I'm the Western Region Premier. Chief Awolowo then volunteered to go and contest for the federal parliament. The Western region will still be there. The Northern region will still be there. The Eastern region will still be there. But the federal parliament will be the one that will control the whole economy. So Awolowo volunteered that he will go to contest election to have a seat in the parliament. So he did, and asked Chief Akintola, his deputy, to become premier. Again, somehow along the line, human nature being what it is, Mrs. Akintola and Mrs. Awolowo began a quarrel that boomeranged into civil disorder in the end in the Western region, because she was unhappy that Mama Awolowo, who was wife of premier, who by virtue of that position had so many benefits that came to her. Some of that was Pepsi Cola. She was a dealer, and whether some NBL, and so many other things that she got dealership for, just because she was wife of premier. So, and she had taken that as a business that she was running for herself. So when Papa Awolowo moved to the center, these businesses were registered in Mrs. Awolowo's name, so she it's still a business that was her business.
Yeah.
It was not a premier's business. So Mr. Akintola said, how can you hold on to the dealerships when you are no longer first lady? So that quarrel started. And before we knew it, the Northerners saw an opportunity to put her into the space that was opening up in the South. They told Akintola, don't worry, we will deal with Awolowo. Form another party, register NNDP or something like that. They formed a new party for Akintola. So they had election. And they were announcing the result of the election. And they will call all the other parties. NPC was the party for Ahmadu Bello. So many numbers. NCNC, so many numbers. NNDP, which is new party for Akintola, so many numbers. AG, Bakodaya. That's the announcer. That's what the announcer read on radio, announcing the results. And because Bakoda then became almost all the seats was Bakodaya. So AG won no seats at all in the West.
What does Bakodaya mean?
Zero.
Zero.
So to announce to the whole nation that the party that controls the West scored zero in an election, and the party that was just formed scored 100%.
Oh, wow.
That was the beginning of the problem. And the rejection of that imposition of the party by the North is what caused the first problem for us.
The Civil
War. And when the coup, before the coup happened, the Westerners were actually pursuing the people in the other party and setting their cars ablaze.
Did you ever witness anything like that?
They were actually burning people, alive.
Burning people alive?
My late uncle happened to be linked remotely with the family of one of the politicians that was loyal to Akintola. His car was pursued with a jerrycan of petrol. It was saved by other strangers. So it was horrible. It was real mayhem in the Western region. So the military came and said they have taken over the power because it was by implication that the young men who went to University College Ibadan then, 5 of them, who then enlisted in the military, are the ones who carried out the coup. And their reason was, they didn't announce anything on radio, but before the coup, it had been argued that the North appears to be dragging us nowhere. And that people who are not competent were the ones handling governance. The result of the population census obviously was seen as a fraud. So they carried out the coup.
So from what you're saying, it seems like most of the problems all started with the North.
Yeah, everything came from their own approach to Nigeria. Nigeria, the way they saw Nigeria is completely different. So once the coup was done, those young men, unfortunately, did not go to the radio to announce that they have removed the head of the army. Or no, they just killed. That's the area that is good to also note. They killed everybody, including Ahmadu Bello, including all the ministers, Omimi Ejo, what is the name of the man now, from Warri. All the ministers that were killed, Westerners, Northerners, but no single Igbo man was killed. That created a problem. And the reason it created a problem was that, as I said, those 5 boys did not go to radio to announce that we have done a coup and we want to move somebody and we are in charge. No, they didn't go to radio. That was the funny part. So they just did the coup and nobody knew who was in charge. Until one of the Northerners who thought, well, we cannot leave this thing to be like that because the Northerners were worried. Then went to Ronsi, who was head of the army, and told him, you cannot sit back and not do something about this, so you must go to the radio and announce and make sure you take control. So that's how officially Ronsi announced that the military has taken over government. Ronsi did not do the coup, as I said, but when he was told to go and play the part of calming the thing down, he announced that he didn't say there was a coup. He just announced that he has dissolved Parliament and the Constitution. And that was the end of any politics. And so that's the first beginning of military rule. But then, in the same period that everybody was then looking at it, that they killed this, they killed that, we can't make any headway or make any sense of what has happened. The people in the north objected to the Igbos who were living in the north for some reason, carrying placards which read, which showed, they didn't put any word there, which showed Ahmadu Bello lying on the floor and the boots of Nzegu on the head of the Ahmadu Bello. Those placards were carried and dancing around the north. That set off the program. And the north just had a kill. That was the beginning of even worse than what happened in the Western region. Then everybody had to run. And the Igbo people in the north became threatened. So automatically everybody was pouring down from the north coming back here. However, staying in Lagos became a problem. Because even though many of the Igbo in Lagos have become almost like the Ojuku's family, the Nwatukus, there are so many of them who had choice properties all over the place in Ikoyi and Lagos Island. They just felt threatened. They had to go. Some of them handed over their property to some of the Yoruba people in the house, the key and to keep for them. Because running as they were running, they don't know what they will meet on the way. So for all that period, the history of Nigeria was one hell of a program. However, after the those who were killing then were Northerners. Killing, and then when the news then came further down here, you had people in Lagos, also maybe some of the Hausas or joining in the chasing of. But in the main, in the West, many of the properties were secured for the owners. Many of them came back and got the money and the rent collected for them.
Wow.
But in Port Harcourt, well, the same thing happened because when this issue was happening, the Igbos actually withdrew from everywhere. They withdrew from everywhere. So even though they dominated Port Harcourt, and Port Harcourt was beautiful then, they withdrew from there. The same thing that should have happened with their property when the Civil War was over, the people in Rivers refused to hand over the houses to the Igbos.
Wow.
So you can see how everything was just so. In the end, it has been one coup and then another coup. Then the third coup that put stop to the whole rascality was when Gowon then was put forward by the military boys that as a Christian, that may calm Nigeria, because what has happened was that Ahmadu Bello was a Muslim. He was killed by the Southerners who were Christians, and the North has, in its own way, killed Christians. So to now quench that riot and coup, because the coup happened, but nothing was working. You didn't know what will happen from morning to night. It was a problem until the military then got worried on its own that unless they calmed it down, it would just be snowboarding.
Yeah.
So they put forward Gowon was a young boy, about 25 or so years old then. And he went to the radio to announce that he's a head of state. And funny enough,
Everything
that
died
calmed
down.
things down.
Wow. So from looking at, Nigeria then, obviously before all the madness,
Yes.
and now, do you think, in your own thoughts, has Nigeria gotten better or has Nigeria gotten worse?
Okay. The truth of the matter was that as a small boy, things I knew about Nigeria then was hygiene and sanitation.
Okay.
It was a culture of society in Nigeria then that your surrounding must be clean. That's because when people were here, they set the rules that everybody, your property is your property. But if the inspectors come round and they find any dirt in your surrounding, anything surrounding your house, you are responsible for it. There will be a problem. So every morning, every household is cleaning all the pavements, the front of the house, the back of the house, the side of the house. The whole place will be swept clean. Even though it was sand, it was not, there was no concrete, nothing. It was clean. The white administrators had inspectors that went around to supervise hygiene.
Wow.
They took it so seriously that they would come visit the house. It's their job to visit and enter into the house. to see where each household stored water.
Okay.
And that was because the story for water in those days when we were young was with earthen pots. No drum then. There was no drum. Earthen pots. And the pots just cover the top. Water will fill it. And what they said was that because of bad sanitation, mosquitoes can breed inside the pots. So to ensure that each household keeps the pot clean and before filling it with water, and then has it properly had a tight lid on it, they must go and see for themselves. Not that they ask question, have you done it? No, they must see it.
But that also helped make sure that people were healthy and not getting sick.
I can tell you, it was the most fantastic period. There was only one hospital in Ijebu, and that hospital ran very well.
So everywhere was clean.
Clean.
So why are things the way they are now?
The areas that had drainages, the water must flow. There's no excuse. The water must. When the sanitation inspector goes round, they also told to fleet the gutter in order to kill the eggs of the mosquitoes. But the gutter water is as clean. You will see the bottom of the gutter.
In Nigeria? I've never...
Those are things that I can never forget. You can you look at the water going like this, the bottom of it you will be seeing. Because if the inspector comes and looks and there is a thing, you are in problem. So those are rigid rules that were kept.
And if they're constantly fleeting, that means you won't have many mosquitoes.
Sends them around to fleet those things so that otherwise Nigerians would have been dying in millions because of mosquito bites. And the reason the Igbo did it was because the white man could not even survive for a long time before when they first came. They were just dying because of mosquito. So it was rigid and it was good, a healthy life. And then we had, nobody had radio. We had radiodiffusion, which is a box just like a speaker, which you get given in your home. But the transmission from Western Nigeria, when we were still regions, was in Ibadan. And it will broadcast all the news you'll be hearing on that box, whatever. Then federal radio station too will broadcast. It has its time, the day that will broadcast. All radio stations in the country must latch on to the federal broadcast. So we saw that, and it was beautiful. So to grow up, and then the lights, we didn't know anything like blackout.
You had 24-hour lights in Nigeria.
As I told you, I grew up in Lagos. Once I went to Igbo College, my uncle was working for UAC. He had been transferred to Lagos. I was living with him.
And you never had a blackout?
No blackouts. No. We didn't. So that's for lights. Then we had pipe-borne water. Pipe-borne water. You may not have it in your home, but the government, every area had a station with taps where there's pipe-borne water, clean, hygienic water.
And nobody was fighting for it?
You just go and queue, take your water. I used to fetch water for my mother. I carry on my head, go back home every morning before I go to school.
Was it free?
It was free. was free. So those are things that we lived through that didn't give us any reason to think that there was going to come a time in which some things would become no longer a right. And you will be having to beg for it, or you will be having to pay through the nose for it, or you'll be having to live without, like the NEPA thing, for instance. So that's the picture of earlier days before independence. Even after, with all this coup and all the things they were doing, there was no blackouts.
Even during the coup?
During the coup.
No blackout.
Only the soldier wants to make sure nobody sees them when they are going to the radio station. They will they first go to NEPA office in Ido and tell the officers that they will station a soldier there to put out the lights for the period they are going to do the coup. As soon as the lights comes back, then they will announce. And you hear announce, we know that the coup has happened. Other than that, no blackouts. No blackout. So we had a completely different experience as young people. And we never, that time we didn't grow up with the fear of blackouts, and the roads that were tarred, most of the roads that were tarred remained tarred, properly tarred. From Lagos to Warri, the ones I, for myself, experienced, even after I came back from the Euro, drove up to Benin. There are some roads that were tarred during the old Western region that were still holding. Whereas the ones that they awarded contracts for, you can see them falling apart.
What do you think the problem is, the reason for this?
Well, first, the coup did not help because once the coup happened, struggle for control then became apparent in that the East thought that because the Hausa were taking on more than they can chew, that they could pull off a total break from the North, and with the Southwest break away and tell the Hausa that we are not going to agree to whatever they are doing. But it was a miscalculation in that when the coup happened, and once he became head of state, the civil service in Lagos, within a few, I don't know, it didn't take much. Once he called for, once he announced the total suspension of the Constitution, and it collapsed the federation into unitary system. There was a bit of resistance to that, even from the West. But the West, for some reason, our attitude was a bit different. We didn't bother. But he's objected to it that, well, not really objected in a way. This was the head of state. You get what I'm saying now? Then collapsed system to a unitary thing in which everybody must go to the center to get instructions. With the passing of time, the North did not like it. The Southwest did not like it. At the time it worked, the East did not oppose. But once it became clear that the thing was not holding and there was no support for this unitary system, East itself now decided that it didn't want it and wanted to break off completely. And that is what precipitated the crisis more.
Okay.
Because from the moment that it became breakaway and no longer just sitting to insist on what we must do right, it became a problem. Excuse me. It became a problem.
Why was it a problem?
Because if they sat down and said to the North, first of all, we want to correct the census and argue it out with them, because the North is not the one who did the census, it's the Igbo people who did the census, okay? Argue it with them. If we sat down south, the west and the east, face them to say, we don't agree to this census, and insist, the North would probably have given, I'm not sure what they would do, but there's no option. We had 3 parts. 2 parts say they don't agree. I thought that would have helped to push the North back a bit. But unfortunately, for some reason, Ojukwu, by that time, had known that the oil now has been announced. Okay? And so he was then concentrating his mind on the East to survive.
By itself. Yeah.
Okay? So, all efforts to mediate by Ghana and some other people just failed. And it is from that insistence on breaking up that the Civil War started.
Before all of this, all the madness that led to the Civil War, were issues like tribalism, were they major in Nigeria?
Oh, yes, they were. And it's a very, very hard, difficult truth to tell. If you look at all literatures written by Nigerians, everybody runs away from the hard parts, which we all were facing. Lagos State was the center, was colonized by the whites. Everybody was coming from their villages to work in Lagos. You get what I'm saying? And because the West was closer to Lagos, it was preponderantly favoring the Yorubas more, the Egbas and the Jebus and the Ileshas, Jeshas and so on. They were favoring them more because it's closer.
In proximity, yeah.
So until the coup that made Nonsi head. So when he also became head, within a short period, the same civil service, I walked into the place myself. Before I went to London, before I traveled out of this country, I needed to go to the ministry to process a program, which is an exchange program between Israel and Nigeria for youths. And I went to the ministry to find out how far it had gone, because we were supposed to travel to Israel in exchange with Israel children coming over here. And the first thing that I realized was that almost every important person I could be there was an Igbo person. So that happened. Then The North, unfortunately, like I said at the beginning, had no educated people. So they then decided, in an argument with the South, that they too must have this federal character thing, their share. So once any of their children went to Quranic school, then and the white people were there running the schools in the North. So we go to Barewa College to learn as a teacher, to become a teacher. Then they will be sent to federal government to come and understudy palm sex. They've not done any work in their lives. They've not done anything in their lives. So not to just bring anybody that has come out of school. Once he has come out, this is secondary school. It's not anything. It will second that person to the federal. And it is with instruction that that person will be understudying the PAMSEC. And within a short time, he becomes a PAMSEC. So the North imposed itself also. Just like Sapia the Yoruba had been, the Igbos had also done. So the North now started doing the same thing. But unfortunately, with the people who are not qualified. So that nepotism, therefore, was a problem. Even though for people like me, the period I grew up in Lagos really was a period in which very few Igbos that were in Lagos were civil servants. Who were educated, rather, were civil servants. A huge number were not educated and were in Lagos. And the way they came to Lagos was like, I remember, for instance, that almost every household of either if you're talking about the civil service, the cadre of permanent secretaries or deputy permanent secretaries, you live in quarters. You get what I mean? Then you have your house help, you have your gardener, you have your driver, so mostly the cook, the gardener, sometimes even the driver will be non-Yorubas. They will come. And then once they are attached to any of the officers, in the course of time, they would ask the officer, they have young ones back home, if the master has any person that needs help, they are able to bring some person. So that's how I grew up seeing that happen. That's how many of those who were not educated came to Lagos. Then before going abroad, our nightlife as bachelors, as young men, also was kind of very interesting. We had nightclubs that we visited. Ambassador Hotel, Central Hotel.
What was the kind of music you listened to back then?
High life.
Okay. Any popular names?
And also Western music, jazz and blues. At that time, we didn't know anything about Jamaican music, but we had jazz, blues, high life. Ghana high life and Nigerian high life. That's different. E.T. Mensah plays the Ghana high life, But the rest of the high life that we had there was played by people like Ayinde Bakare and Tunde Nightingale. And that juju was the real show of that period. We didn't have anything like Obi or Sonny or all these new people now, or Koso. We didn't have them then. When we were, post-secondary school, we had quite a number of musicians, Charles Wegwe, Rex Lawson, it's a whole gamut of musicians that were indigenous. But, and we had a good time as young people. At the time, we were spending one naira. No, even 1 naira. Before I went abroad, we were spending pounds in Nigeria. Before I went abroad, it was £1 for beer, for a bottle of beer, and to enter any club, £3.
When you look at, young people clubbing these days and you compare it to back your days, do you feel, things have gotten wilder or? The way things have gone, in our own days, there was nothing to influence our behavior, like Western influence much. In the Jabu day, there was no cinema. When I was growing up, when I then went to Lagos, there were a few cinemas, but I was not old enough to be going to cinema because I couldn't afford to pay for it. But things like fashion, we had fashion. Okay, the Western culture was creeping in through cinema. We used to have trousers that were worn by young men then with big bottom. When you are going to wear, you just wear with your shoe put on, it just go straight in. And that was the fashion, and everybody wore that. But one thing was important at that time, that neatness was considered very important when we were growing up, very important. And that must have been impacted in most of the young people then because of the boarding house education. Because invariably, most of the missionary schools ran boarding houses. Only a few day boys would go from home then. And because of the boarding houses have a street culture, they would launder the clothes for you. So there's no way you are going to wear clothes that are dirty in school. It's laundered for you. Then you must dress neatly to class, otherwise your teacher would query you. And so it followed us out into the world where you knew you had to dress in a particular way. Neatly.
Be neat. That is what today I find a bit uncomfortable, in the sense that by the time I grew up to going to the UK, I found that once I was in my suit, the policemen in the UK, the people that are keeping the streets and all of those, who will be creating problems for normal people, either for not standing where you should stand and so on and so forth, once you are in suit, they talk to you politely.
Because of the way you're dressed.
Yes. And so that was the vogue then. There was no way you're going to go into the tube, except you are a road worker where you are going to do road work and so on and so forth. Then you go in your uniform. Going out to work must be in suit and tie. That's the norm. Whether you are a chef or whatever it is, going out to work, you will be in suit and tie. So that influenced us then. But as the American way of life began to impact on us, then we started loosening up, until it came to a point in which even the wealthy sold us a dummy. We used to see Jobs or the owner of Microsoft wearing jeans. And then everybody say, you see, wearing jeans, that is trouble started. Everybody then had to wear jeans and so on. So that, to me, is a difference, which is very obvious. But that's what life is now, so that's everybody has to go with it.
When you look back on life, what do you feel are your biggest lessons that you've learned?
Plains to know that you have to work hard on your own and not rely on anybody. But if help comes, then you take it. But begin by not expecting anybody to help. That's what I learned, and it's stayed with me.
Do you have any regrets in life?
Well, regrets, I would say, I wish I had a father figure in my life because it has affected me negatively. And in fact, it's good my son is sitting down here. I've not been a good father to them because I don't know how to be a father. I can see that myself. Because you can only give what you have. What you don't have, you cannot give. So not having what it would be like to have a father that you can sit down and talk to, or that was going to ask you questions and you answer, that was a big, that filled my life with void. And it has impacted the way I grew up completely. I've seen for myself that it's been negative. So not having a father figure.
So from your 88 years,
yes,
what would you say are the most important things in life?
Learning to be content once you know you've done your best, thrown your best at anything you are doing. Because there's nothing more destructive than moaning about something you cannot help. I've got to understand that once you've done your best about a thing, then you must be content with what you've got at the end of that. If I look back on my life, that's what has carried me through, because I went abroad without anybody sponsoring me. I had to work through education in London. I had to, coming back to Nigeria also, I didn't rely on anybody, but the family on their own just brought me back against my wish at the time they brought me back. So, but other than that, is learning to be content, because that gives you peace with yourself.
From everything you've seen in life,
Yes.
what do you feel is the meaning of this life?
Well, life on its own, for me, as an adult now, and that's beginning from the time I grew past 50, because my father died at the age of 47. So by the time I got to 50, and I thought, oh, I've done it, so I'm no longer dying young, and so on. And I started seeing that whatever I want to face, I must face it, but also know that I'm not in control of the future that I'm facing. From about 50, 55, that I became more religious. That is what has led me from then on till now. Because when I was younger, I used to think of moving mountains. When even I know that mountains will not move, and then I will moan about not being able to move the mountains, make myself unhappy. But no, face life and then be content. Once you've done your best, then be content with what you have.
What advice do you have for younger people out there who haven't yet gotten to the age you've gotten to? What advice do you have?
Well, one thing that I think had been my own personal desire is that in life I've grown up to see people marry off their children or seeing their sons marry. And then they've told stories, very sweet stories and nice stories about what they must not do, what they must do. In my adult life, I've come to realize how we are all pretenders. We are in denial.
Why do you say that?
Because life is not like that. Two people who don't know each other at all, except from courting, they want to marry one another. When they do marry, that will be their first marriage in their life. Okay? And they are from different parenthood. They are going to have crisis. There's no way how they can run away from that.
That's true.
In my adulthood, I've found that trying to do less damage, minimum damage, just avoid damaging matters more by your intervention. In marrying off your daughter, you plenty talk, you don't do this, your husband, you don't do that to your husband, you do this to your wife, you do this to your wife, blah, 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 blah. It's not a really helpful way. Up to tomorrow, that still happens. If I have my way, I want to change that. For instance, that the two must understand they would have to have real patience to understand one another. Because when you are apart, the love will be like, oh, I have not seen my fiancé or my girlfriend. All of that is just for the show. The real thing starts when you start living together. And the advice that young men, women need is that you must be prepared to give it time, real patience. Not patience for fun, but patience to understand one another. Because you are going to be stuck together. But nobody tells that to the children. Everybody just say, oh, hey, your friend will carry this away. When you tell them, they will take your husband away. Oh, they will take your wife away. Those are irrelevancies. The short and straightforward truth is that you are going to begin to live together. The prayer must be that God will give you guidance to have the patience, because we need the patience to learn to understand one another. And that understanding means you will be annoyed, but you must not let the annoyance then create a quarrel.
Yeah.
If you are annoyed, yes, you are annoyed. But remember that you must have patience to understand the other person.
So what advice do you have for the millions of Nigerian youth who say that, that your generation was the one that ruined Nigeria?
Oh, yeah, they can say so, but to a large extent, they will say so. But what they don't understand is that in their own generation also, they will find that there will be a large number of them who will also contribute to troubles for them. Because the reason I say so is that, okay, all the earlier politicians that we grew up to see were 32, 33 when they were leading us as a nation. Okay? The corruption that crept into our system did not come because it's Nigerians who started it. When I was young as a graduate of secondary school, I was working with UHT. And I had a boss with whom I served, and we had a white manager whose office, we were in the same office, but the manager had a glass separating us. My boss sat at my right-hand side, and we were selling, UHT was selling gas cylinders to manufacturers of soft drinks and welders and so on. And we will sit down there and people will come to buy gas. I noticed that some people will come, they'll be told there is no gas. That we don't have gas. That is finished. You should come back tomorrow. Then some other people will come and I will be called. Babs, go and write 2 cylinders for this gentleman. And I'll write. You see, and which means that we are telling lies right there.
Lying. Yeah.
Right there. Okay? And then when I left UAC, I worked for RT Briscoe. I realized that in Nigeria, in accounting, even before RT Briscoe, I worked for UAC Niger House in the accounts department. In accounting, at the end of the year, during the year, there's a budget for every department. You want to buy this, you approach your head of department, who knows how much money there is in the, and then say, okay, go and please help you raise an order for it in science. When you go again for it, and say, no, there is not much money left, so maybe we will have to leave that out. Then comes December. I'm talking before I went abroad. Then you'll be told, then they will go to the ledger and then tell you, oh, there is a lot of money.
Thank you so much, sir. It's been amazing having you in studio today.
All right.
And I'm sure that all your wisdom, I hope that all your wisdom is able to help the young people out there and give them a better understanding of life. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
So if you enjoyed
It's been quite a pleasure because getting me to sit down and talk for this long. It's no easy task, but we've done it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment there and let us know what you think about what the great Tayese has said today. Thank you for watching. Bye.